Yo, what's good, and welcome back to Casual Takes, where today I'm going to be talking about the 10 best strikers that should join your club that you've probably never even heard of. So I'm going to break this down into a little bit about them, sort of general information, where they're from, style of foot, the club they play for, and how many goals they've got this season. Then I'm going to sort of talk about their play style, their physicality, how they deal with all of that. And then I'm going to give a comparison to a player profile that's a bit more widely known. Now that doesn't mean that they're exactly like that player or they will be as good as their player. They just have a similar, sort of play style to them. I've tried to pick strikers that sort of haven't played in the Premier League and sort of aren't well known in the public eye. So I've not gone for names, like Victor Gyökeres or a Jonathan David or Benjamin Sesko or Lois Openda. I've sort of tried to go, a little bit more niche than that. Anyways, with that kicking off, I'm going to cover our La Liga strikers, and we're going to start with Samu Omorodion. He is a 19-year-old striker at Alaves on loan from Atletico Madrid, who signed him for €6 million at the start of the season. He has 9 goals in only 22 starts. He's a very good dribbler and physically and technically gifted. He's quite imposing at 6'3". His finishing still needs some work. He's slightly underperforming his XG this season week. At 19, he has bags of potential. And who does he remind me of right now? He has a very similar profile to Darwin Núñez in terms of the sort of chaos he can create, the runs, the dribbling, the physicality, and some technical ability too, even with sort of the lack of finishing. So he's definitely a name I keep out for in the next 2-3 years, whether it's at Atletico Madrid or at another club. Up next, it's not a surprise considering Girona are doing so well, but I've gone with their number 9, Artem Dovbyk. He is a 26-year-old striker who they signed from SK Dnipro 1 last season. He has 19 goals for Girona, so as of speaking, and if you combine his time over the last 2 seasons at Girona and Dnipro, he has 53 goals and assists. He's very much sort of an old school striker, scores a lot from crosses, poachers, goals, etc, etc. He holds the ball up very well, he's quite strong, he links up, he's not particularly mobile. So who he reminds me of? He reminds me a lot of an Ivan Toney type player, not the most mobile but very technically sound and very good in the penalty box. And those are the 2 La Liga strikers done. I'm now going to move on to the Bundesliga, and up first we have Maximilian Bayer, a 21-year-old German striker for Hoffenheim. He has 13 goals and 1 assist this season, which earned him a Germany call-up, although he hasn't quite achieved his first cap. He's got a very good long-range strike and very quick feet, completing 1.3 successful take-ons per 90 and 2.4 progressive carries. He's not the most physical or the fastest, which limits him in some ways, but like very good link-up play to sort of make up for that. Who he reminds me of with his ability on the ball and his ball striking. He reminds me sort of a shorter Alexander Isak, and he's definitely a name I'd be looking out for. Now, the other name from the Bundesliga that you should watch out for this summer is Ermedin Demirovic. He's a 26-year-old German striker who captains his club, Wolfsburg. He's got 15 goals and 9 assists this season. He can also play on the left, and as a 10 he can play along the front line basically. He's a bit of an all-rounder, decent dribbler, very good finisher, decent enough link-up play, and with that versatility of positions and sort of the all-round nature with the good finishing he has, he reminds me a lot of a Diogo Jota type player. Now, I'd say we've done two biggest leagues I've mentioned. Now I'm going to go on to the Dutch league, or the Eredivisie, and talk about sort of a name that hasn't been mentioned in the headline. So we've heard a lot about Santiago Jimenez, the Feyenoord striker, obviously with the links to Arne Slot, who looks like he's going to Liverpool. But I'm going to be looking across the city at Ajax and at Brian Brobbey. He's a 22-year-old Dutch striker, extremely strong, backs down defenders with ease. If you go look at some of his highlights, a lot of it will be with his back to the defender. He'll spin them, either score, lay it off, or go on a nice run. He's also quite competent technically, with a 94% pass completion rate, which is extremely impressive no matter what league you play in. He has 17 goals and 7 assists in the Eredivisie this season, and I think the sky's the limit for someone like him. He's shown clear progression season on season, and I think he's ready to make that step up to the bigger leagues. His player comp, he reminds me of a Didier Drogba, obviously nowhere near the ability of a Drogba yet, but sort of the way he's strong enough to roll defenders, he's fast enough to get away from them, he's good in the air, and not necessarily the tallest, but uses his physicality extremely well. Now on to the French league, and obviously the names that you hear bandied around are Kylian Mbappe, Kolo Muani, Gonzalo Ramos, Jonathan David. So I've tried to go with something a little bit different for that. To start, kick us off, I have the 24-year-old Nigerian striker Terem Moffi. He has 11 goals and 2 assists in 27 games this season, but in 3 of his last 4 seasons in Ligue 1, he has hit double digits, so he's a very consistent player. He's strong runner in behind, sort of quick, good movement in behind on the counter-attack in transition, and a fairly solid finisher. I'm not sure whether his play style suited to one of the biggest clubs, but I think it could transition nicely into a possibly bigger or better league. His player comparison, I would say, as of right now, would be someone like Jamie Vardy from 4 or 5 seasons ago, where he sort of used that yard of pace to get him behind, beat his man, just slot it bottom corner one-on-one with the keeper. The next name I've got is Elia Wahi, a 21-year-old striker from Lens. He has 10 goals and 3 assists in 34 games this season, which is 0.52 goals per 90 though, because he's had limited minutes because he struggled with injuries. He had 19 goals for Montpellier last season, and of all the strikers I've mentioned on the list, he has the widest range of finishes, whether it be with his head, with his left foot, right foot, one-on-ones, cutbacks, getting on the end of crosses or on through balls. He seems to be a very all-round finisher, and who he reminds me of is obviously, once again, nowhere near the ability, but a young Harry Kane at Tottenham, where he would sort of just have that knack for finishing, that idea for finishing. I think he's one to keep an eye on if he can stay injury-free in that Lens team. And the final player in the French league we're going to be looking at is Tige de Linger. He is a 23-year-old striker for Toulouse. He has 12 goals and 2 assists in 30 games this season, which has already surpassed his tally of 11 goals from the season before. He's a very solid all-rounder, a decent finisher, passer, good in the air. He's quite tall, good link-up play, but he doesn't sort of stand out in one area like maybe a Brian Brobbey does with his physicality, or Terem Moffi does with his pace, or say a Demirovic does with his versatility. That being said, he can do a lot of stuff well, so he reminds me a bit of Kai Havertz is playing at Arsenal right now, where he does everything solidly and he sort of just helps the team sort of click and tick on, and he chips in with this very similar amount of goals to Havertz actually, who also has 12 goals this season. Now on to the Portuguese league, where I think we have the best 2 strikers on the list. Now first up we have Evan Nilsson from a 24-year-old striker for Porto. He has 14 games in Liga NOS this season, but 23 goals in 38 games in all competitions this season. Good presser, technically gifted, nice little bits of dribbling that with a little bit of flair, which is to be expected as he's Brazilian. He reminds me a lot of Julian Alvarez from Man City, where he's not necessarily the strongest and he is quite poor in the air. I think if I get up his FBref right now, I think he wins just over 1.1 aerials per 90, which for a striker is fairly poor, especially one of his stats as he clocks in at over 6 foot. But with his relentless pressing and his ability on the ball and his solid finishing makes him a striker that you keep your eye out for. He's had a very good goal return in the Champions League this season as well, returning with four goals and an assist in 7 games. And then the final striker on this list, and who I think has the most potential, is Marcos Leonardo, a 21-year-old Brazilian striker who plays for Benfica. He has 7 goals in just 277 minutes since signing for them, and previously had 35 goals in 100 games in the Brazilian league as a player that was predominantly a teenager or 20 years old. He's a bit of an all-rounder, a bit like Tish Delinga, but I'd say more technically gifted and more of a composed finisher. Fairly strong and fairly mobile for his build, and I would say the player he reminds me most of is Lautaro Martinez, where he's maximised his tools to the maximum efficiency, and he's just a goal-getter, and I think he could explode in Liga NOS next season, hitting 20, 25, 30 goals, and if he does, you heard it here first. So anyways, let me know what you thought of this video. If you stuck around this long, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.